The silence after the storm. August 1945. For the first time in years, Japan was silent. No air raid sirens, no marching boots, no thunder of bombs, only wind through shattered windows and the cries of hungry children. The war had ended, but peace had not yet begun. The city of ash. In the outskirts of Hiroshima, black dust still hung in the air. Trees stood like skeletons. Buildings leaned against each other, hollow and broken. Amid the ruins, a young mother named Aiko searched the rubble for anything edible. A grain of rice, a burnt fishbone, something. The children of hunger, her son Sora, 7, followed closely, clutching his little sister Hana's hand. Hana was 5, her face pale, her clothes too large. She whispered, "Mama, I'm hungry." Aiko smiled weakly. "Soon, my love, soon." But she had nothing to give. Ghosts of yesterday. They passed what once was a school. Charred desks, twisted iron. On the wall, a faded banner read, "Victory for the Empire." Aiko turned away. That word, victory, felt like a cruel joke now. The Emperor's voice. That evening a voice came from a broken radio in the village square. The Emperor himself, gentle, calm, distant. He said Japan had surrendered. The villagers fell silent. No one cheered. No one spoke. Only tears rolled down faces that had forgotten what emotion felt like. The shadow of surrender. For generations, they had been taught that surrender was dishonor, worse than death. Now they were told it was salvation. The confusion cut deeper than hunger. Aiko's memory. As she sat by the ruins that night, Aiko thought of her husband, once a proud soldier, now ashes somewhere across the Pacific. She whispered to the night sky, "You fought to protect us, but what protects us now?" The return of the wind. Days passed. The stench of war lingered, burnt flesh, decay, smoke. Yet in the mornings, the sound of birds began to return. Life, stubborn as it was, refused to die. Strangers on the horizon. One afternoon, while gathering firewood near the hills, Sora spotted something moving on the road. At first, he thought it was soldiers. He ran to his mother. "Mama, they're back!" Aiko froze. "Who?" "Men in strange uniforms," he said. "Tall, big, carrying flags. The first Americans." They stood in formation, their helmets gleaming under the weak sunlight. U.S. soldiers. Their faces were foreign, loud. For the first time, Japan saw its conquerors not as distant monsters, but as men. Tired, dusty, and young. Fear returns. Villagers ran into their homes, shutting doors, whispering prayers. Rumors had spread that Americans would punish them, take revenge for Pearl Harbor. Mothers hid their children. Men bowed their heads in shame. Aiko's dilemma. Aiko gathered Sora and Hana inside their small hut. "Don't look at them," she whispered. "Don't speak." But Sora couldn't stop peeking through the cracked door. "They don't look angry, Mama," he whispered. "They look tired." The march of the foreigners. The American convoy rolled through the destroyed streets. Soldiers handed out small white papers to the elders, written in Japanese. "We come in peace. We will share food. Do not fear." But no one believed it. Not yet. The empty storehouse. That night, Aiko visited the old village storehouse where the last food had been kept. Empty. Only rats scurried through the shadows. She knelt down and wept quietly, covering her mouth so her children wouldn't hear. The first encounter. The next morning, while filling water from a broken pipe, Aiko heard footsteps behind her. She turned slowly. an American soldier stood there, holding a metal canteen. He didn't speak Japanese. She didn't speak English. For a long, trembling moment, they just stared. The gesture. He smiled gently and pointed to her bucket, then poured water into it from his canteen. Aiko stepped back, unsure if it was a trick. But when he finished, he nodded politely and left without a word. The whisper of change. That night, Sora asked, "Mama, the soldier helped you?" Aiko nodded slowly. Yes, he did. Hana smiled. Maybe he's nice. Aiko looked at her daughter and thought, maybe. The next day, when morning came, more soldiers entered the village, carrying boxes, sacks, and strange machines. One of them had a red cross painted on his sleeve. He wasn't here to fight. He was a medic. The drop from the sky. From the horizon, an airplane flew low and scattered parachutes. The villagers screamed, fearing another bomb. But instead of fire, the parachutes carried food. Bread, canned meat, powdered milk. Children ran forward in disbelief. The first smile. Aiko picked up a small can stamped USA. Inside, peaches. Sweet, golden, perfect. She hadn't tasted sugar in years. Sora grinned, mouth sticky with syrup. "Mama, it's sweet." For the first time since the war began, Aiko laughed. The day after the drop, the village buzzed with confusion. People gathered around the dropped crates, stamped with U.S. Army aid. No one dared touch them. Some feared they were traps. Others whispered that the Americans wanted to poison them. But hunger eventually overcame fear. The taste of mercy. The first brave soul, an old man named Kenji, opened a box and pulled out a loaf of white bread. He sniffed it, then bit into it. Tears rolled down his face. "It's food," he said softly. Within minutes, the villagers surrounded the crates. The rumor of kindness. Word spread like wildfire. The Americans bring food, not bullets. For the first time in years, strangers gathered not to mourn, but to eat. The soldier returns. The same soldier who helped Aiko at the water pipe returned, this time with others. He waved gently at her children. Sora hid behind his mother's legs. Hana peeked out shyly. Tears of a mother. Aiko stood frozen, watching her daughter smile. That one small act, a piece of candy from the hand of a foreign soldier, broke something inside her. Not in pain, but in release. She began to cry quietly, the kind of tears that wash away fear. The photo. A photographer traveling with the troops snapped a picture. A Japanese child eating chocolate. A U.S. soldier kneeling beside her. Neither smiled for the camera. It was too pure for posing. That photo would later be published around the world, titled "Peace Begins with Candy." Sora's curiosity. That night, Sora asked his mother, "Why did they give us candy, Mama? We were the enemy." Aiko thought for a moment. Because maybe they don't want to be enemies anymore. The forgotten enemy. One elderly villager whispered to Aiko, "I never thought I'd see the day when an American helped us." Aiko nodded slowly. Neither did I. Shadows of the past. Still, not everyone accepted the kindness. Some older men refused food from American hands, muttering, "They burned our cities." But even they couldn't deny what their eyes saw. Soldiers kneeling to tie a child's shoe. Not to harm, but to help. The gift of hope. Hana's cough worsened one evening. A medic heard her crying and offered her mother a small bottle of syrup. Aiko hesitated, then accepted. Within days, Hana's cough eased. Hope began to breathe again. The village transforms. Days turned into weeks. The Americans built a small medical tent, then a food station. They helped rebuild bridges and handed out soap, bandages, and canned milk. The people, once too afraid to look them in the eye, began to smile when they passed. Language of humanity. No one spoke the same tongue, but kindness doesn't need translation. The soldiers began learning simple Japanese words: hello, thank you, friend. Children shouted, "Hello, GI-san," every time a convoy rolled through. Sora's drawing. Sora drew a picture of the soldier and gave it to him, a stick figure holding candy beside a smiling child. The soldier laughed, patted his head, and gave him a stick of gum in return. The forgotten enemy. One elderly villager whispered to Aiko, "I never thought I'd see the day when an American helped us." Aiko nodded slowly. Neither did I. Shadows of the past. Still, not everyone accepted the kindness. Some older men refused food from American hands, muttering, "They burned our cities." But even they couldn't deny what their eyes saw. Soldiers kneeling to tie a child's shoe, not to harm, but to help. The gift of hope. Hannah's cough worsened one evening. A medic heard her crying and offered her mother a small bottle of syrup. Aiko hesitated, then accepted. Within days, Hannah's cough eased. Hope began to breathe again. The return of light. In the weeks that followed, laughter returned to the streets. Children ran after jeeps shouting, "Candy, candy!" What began as suspicion turned into a ritual. American soldiers tossing sweets as they drove by, greeted by cheers and smiles. The language of gratitude. Aiko learned to say 2 English words, "Thank you." She said it every time she met the soldier. His name tag read Thompson. He always replied, "You're welcome," though neither truly understood the other's words, only their meaning. The Festival of Peace. Months later, the Americans helped rebuild the local temple. They joined the first post-war festival. No weapons, no orders. Just music, rice cakes, and laughter. Thompson watched the lanterns float into the sky. "We came here as soldiers," he whispered. "We leave as friends." The candy jar. Before leaving Japan, Thompson handed Aiko a small glass jar filled with colorful sweets. "For your children," he said. Aiko clutched it like treasure. To her, it wasn't candy. It was proof that kindness could survive war. Months later, winter came softly that year. For the first time in memory, the village didn't dread it. The Americans had helped repair roofs, dig wells, and bring supplies. The world was still scarred, but the people were learning to live again. Sora's curiosity. Sora followed the soldiers every morning, eager to learn English words. "Hello," he'd shout proudly, saluting. Thompson would grin. "Hey, buddy," he'd say, handing him a stick of gum. To Sora, these little gifts were more than candy. They were proof that monsters didn't always wear uniforms. The school reopens. Under a patched roof, the old school reopened. The Americans donated chalk and books. Aiko watched her children sit at desks again, their hands clean, eyes bright. The war had taken everything, but not their will to learn. The candy jar's promise. Every night, Aiko would give her children one piece from the jar Thompson gave them. "One for each day of peace," she'd whisper. They savored every sweet moment, both the candy and the silence of no air raids. Friendship without words. Thompson and Aiko met often. She'd bring him tea. He'd bring her supplies. They never spoke much, but sometimes silence said enough. In those quiet exchanges, 2 former enemies became human again. The letter from America. One morning, a mail truck arrived with a letter. Thompson handed it to her, pointing to the name written in careful English, Aiko. She opened it slowly. Inside was a drawing from his daughter back home, a picture of a little girl holding a candy jar. On the back, "For the children in Japan." The realization. Aiko wept softly. For years, she'd believed kindness had died with the bombs. But now, She saw that compassion could cross oceans, carried not by armies but by hearts. The seeds of change. The Americans brought seeds for planting. The villagers, once too weak to till the land, worked side by side with the soldiers. Sora planted his first seed with Thompson's help. "It'll grow strong," Thompson said, pressing the soil. Sora smiled. "Like us?" Thompson laughed. "Exactly like us." The new generation. Hannah's laugh filled the streets now. She ran barefoot, her candy jar clinking at her side. Children from both sides of the war played together, Japanese and American, kicking makeshift balls made of cloth. The wound of pride. Not everyone welcomed peace. Aiko's brother, a wounded veteran, scolded her. "You accept food from the enemy? Have you forgotten your husband?" Aiko looked down. "He fought for our future. And this is the future." The moment of gratitude. On New Year's Day, Aiko brought Thompson a simple gift, a paper crane folded from an old newspaper. She bowed deeply, whispering, "Arigato." Thompson, not understanding the words, but feeling their weight, bowed in return. The farewell orders. One morning, the sound of trucks echoed again. The soldiers had received orders. The aid mission was ending. Sora ran after Thompson, shouting, "No go, stay!" Thompson knelt and hugged the boy. "I have to go home, buddy." The candy exchange. Before leaving, he gave Sora one last candy bar, his last ration. Sora hesitated, then broke it in half and gave a piece back to Thompson. The man smiled, his eyes wet. "Friends," he said softly. "Tomodachi," Sora replied. The departure. The jeeps rolled away, leaving behind silence and dust. Aiko and her children watched until the last truck vanished beyond the horizon. She held Hana close. "Someday," she whispered, "we'll see them again." The candy jar emptied. Weeks passed. The jar of candy grew lighter. But Aiko didn't feel sadness. Each sweet gone was a memory lived. When the final candy was gone, she placed a small paper crane inside the jar. Years later, by 1950, the village had transformed. New houses, laughter, a rebuilt school. American help had ended, but the kindness lingered like perfume after a hug. Invisible, but unforgettable. Sora's dream. As a teenager, Sora told his mother, "I want to learn English, to be like Thompson." Aiko smiled proudly. "Then do it, my son. Show the world what peace looks like." The letter back. Years later, Sora wrote his first letter in English. To Mr. Thompson, it began. He thanked him for the candy, for the laughter, for giving him hope when the world was ash. The reply. Months later, a reply arrived. Thompson's handwriting was shaky but clear. "Dear Sora, I remember you. You reminded me that the war ended not when the guns went silent, but when we shared candy." The return of the candy jar. In his letter, Thompson mentioned he still kept the half candy bar wrapper folded inside a photo of Sora. In Hiroshima, Aiko placed the glass jar on the shelf beside her husband's portrait. "One fought for our freedom," she whispered. "The other taught us peace." The passing of years, time moved gently in the rebuilt village. Children who once ran after jeeps were now adults, working in the fields, studying in schools built with American aid. Sora, now 25, stood where he once saw parachutes fall, remembering that day when the sky gave candy instead of fire. The new Japan factories hummed again. Radios played songs of peace, not propaganda. Aiko watched from her small garden, proud yet distant. Though the nation healed, she knew the scars remained. Invisible, quiet, but deep. The letter unopened. Among her things, Aiko kept a single sealed envelope. Thompson's last letter never opened. She said she would read it when the world feels safe again. Years passed. She never found the right day, until one came unexpectedly. The sad news. A new letter arrived from America. Thompson's daughter wrote, "My father spoke of your family often. He passed away last spring. He kept your son's picture by his bedside." Aiko wept for a man she had barely spoken to, yet who had changed her life forever. The paper cranes. That evening, she folded 1,000 paper cranes, each one for a wish, a life, a prayer. When she finished, she placed them in the candy jar and whispered, "May kindness never die." The journey across the ocean. Sora, now fluent in English, decided to travel to America as part of a peace exchange program. It was his first time leaving Japan. As the plane crossed the Pacific, he looked down at the waves and thought, this is where the war began, and where peace was born. Arrival in America. The air smelled different, clean, sharp, unfamiliar. At the airport, a woman with kind eyes held a sign, Sora. She was Margaret Thompson, the daughter of the soldier who gave them candy. The meeting of two worlds. When Sora bowed, she smiled through tears. "Dad told me everything." She led him to her home, walls lined with old photos, medals, and one small frame on a desk. Inside it, a picture of Sora as a boy, holding half a candy bar. The memory of sweetness. Margaret handed him a small tin box. Inside was the same candy wrapper, preserved carefully. He said it reminded him that kindness wins wars better than bullets, she whispered. The dinner table. That night, they shared a meal, rice and vegetables, the same food Aiko once offered in Japan. Sora smiled. "Feels like home." Margaret replied softly, "It is home for both of us." Aiko's letter. Before leaving Japan, Aiko had given Sora a letter to deliver to Margaret. "For your father's kindness and for your friendship. When he gave my daughter candy, he gave my family hope." Margaret read it, tears streaming silently down her face. The visit to the cemetery. Together, they visited Thompson's grave. Sora placed a single paper crane beside the tombstone. "Arigato," he whispered. The wind picked up, as if carrying his words beyond the horizon. The lesson. Shared years later, Sora became a teacher. Of English, of peace, of memory. In his classroom, he kept an old candy jar filled with colorful paper cranes. He told his students, "This jar once held candy. Now it holds stories, proof that even enemies can become friends." Hana's dream. Back in Japan, Hana grew up and became a nurse. Every patient she cared for received one piece of candy, a reminder that sweetness could heal even invisible wounds. The reunion festival. Decades later, the village held a peace festival. Elderly villagers shared stories of the first American soldiers who came after the war, how they rebuilt homes, how they gave candy to hungry children. Aiko, now gray-haired, sat quietly in the front row, smiling. The interview. A journalist approached her. "Madam, what did you think when the Americans first arrived?" She thought for a long time, then said, "I thought they came to conquer us, but they came to teach us what victory truly means." The final goodbye. That winter, Aiko passed away peacefully, the candy jar by her bedside. When Sora opened it, he found the last paper crane and the unopened letter from Thompson. Inside it were 6 simple words. "Thank you for showing me peace." The legacy lives on. Sora placed both letters, his mother's and Thompson's, into the Hiroshima Peace Museum. Visitors from around the world came to see the candy jar. On the plaque beneath it, a line read, "War divides nations. Kindness unites them." Generations later, decades passed. Children now ran through clean streets, chasing each other with laughter, not fear. Tourists still bought candy at the local market, where a small sign read, "Inspired by the first candy from America." The sweetest victory. In the ashes of defeat, a single piece of candy built a bridge no war could destroy. It crossed oceans, generations, and hearts, reminding us that even the smallest kindness can rewrite history. The final image fades, a child's hand holding a candy, reflected in the sunlight.